Pokemon Gold and Silver, released in 1999 for the Game Boy Color, they are one of the most beloved games in the franchise and one of the best-selling, with over 23 million copies sold. But does that make them one of the best games in the franchise? Well, in my opinion, no, and it's not even close. I in fact think that these games are the worst games in the franchise. But first, to give credit where credit is due, Pokemon Gold and Silver as a sequel do a couple of things very right, and the additions that these games bring with them are extremely important for the future of the series and make them, in my opinion, one of the most influential games in the franchise. The addition of Pokemon holding items is an amazing mechanic, and the variety of new Pokeballs is great. Getting rid of the extremely broken special stat is a blessing by God himself, and psychic types which you couldn't even scoff at previously are not so much a dominant force anymore, with the great inclusion of steel and dark types which counter them perfectly. The music is much better, with more calming and soothing themes being a pleasantry for years, and the god-awful inventory from Red and Blue is finally fixed with the addition of separate pockets for Pokeballs, TMs, and key items, making running out of storage much harder and making the game exploration aspect much better. The game is also get rid of a lot of broken mechanics from Red and Blue, which is a step into the right direction. And that's where all the good things I have to say about Gold and Silver end, because these games are an absolute mess at their core. Even though Red and Blue are so much more messier and plain out dysfunctional, they were at least fun to play because of how amazingly broken they were. So, what makes Pokemon Gold and Silver truly the shittiest games in the franchise? Well, a couple of things, which I will go one by one separately. So sit back, grab a snack, and enjoy, because this is why Pokemon Gold and Silver are the worst games in the franchise. One of the core and essential problems of Gold and Silver are Pokemon themselves. Generation 2 adds 100 new Pokemon, which is a huge number taking into consideration that there were only 151 Pokemon in the previous game. But even though 100 new Pokemon sounds amazing, it really doesn't feel like the game adds that many new mons. You don't encounter Gen 2 Pokemon even closely as Gen 1, and you can really feel this in the early game, which is a huge shame because you can't experience the new designs and mons off the bat. But one of the rare Gen 2 Pokemon that you will have at your disposal at the beginning is the starter you pick, and in my opinion, the Generation 2 starters are the worst starters in the franchise. The starters in these games are just bland, and they are a huge downgrade from the generation before. The only exception here is Cyndaquil, which is a cool design and has a solid evolutionary line, but even the Cyndaquil line completely fumbles any hope it had just by comparing the stats with the Charmander line. These mons are a blatant copy, stat by stat, from HP to speed. Cyndaquil and Charmander are the same Pokemon, as are Quilava and Charmeleon, which is just insane when you think about it. The same would have been said for Typhlosion and Charizard if Charizard wasn't a flying type, and the other starters don't fare much better. Totodile is best referred to as the middleman of the starters. While I do like Totodile's design, I think its evolutions really bring it back down a peg. They just don't add anything new and interesting but make the mon bigger, and that's how I mostly feel with Gen 2 starters. He is also just another one in the line of offensive water types which aren't any good because of water being a special typing in Generation 2. The last and certainly the least of the starters is Chikorita. I think that Chikorita is the worst grass starter in the franchise, and I never heard anyone love Chikorita or its evolutions. I just think it's a very average design and a very average mon with not much going on, and its evolutions are also just plain out boring. Johto's Pokédex also just does an awful job of adding Pokemon that were desperately needed in Generation 1. You want a new dragon type? Well, we've got an evolution of a previous Gen 1 Pokemon, but you need to trade to get it. One more Ghost types because the Ghastly line sucks ass against Psychic types and you can't trade for Gengar, so you have to settle for Honor. Well, fuck you, here's a Misdreavus, which is completely unusable and learns no attacking Ghost type moves by level up. Also, is it just me or does this game add way too many normal types and too little of any other typings, and the inclusions that are actually good are either trade evolutions or very late game appearances? You get 15 new normal types, just one Ghost type, one Dragon type, and if we didn't include the starter, just 4 Fire types. Gen 2 Pokemon are also stat-wise just very bad. They are awfully slow and just slow in general, either because of their stats or awful typings, and even though there are some interesting additions like Wobbuffet and Shuckle, they are just way too gimmicky to use and a pain to grind up. This problem is just huge, and it makes the replayability of the game very bad. Because there is so many bad Pokemon, your team is mostly going to consist of your starter, Ampharos, Gyarados from the Lake of Rage, and just any other Gen 1 mons you found. Also, why don't just some of these Pokemon have an evolution? These Pokemon seem like pretty good additions, except that they are absolutely unusable in their current state. I mean, they are just begging for an evolution. Props to them for waiting 2 generations to get it and not getting them in the game they were introduced. The variety of encounters is yet another in the series of problems. The variety is so small and it feels like you encounter the same Pokemon over and over again, especially when you're surfing or fishing, and it just makes the game seem super slow, uninteresting, and plain out boring. In conclusion, the Generation 2 Pokédex has some amazing and awful mons, but the awesome Pokemon are usually beyond your reach, so you have to settle for the leftovers of pretty meh Pokemon which don't get much screen time in the game they're introduced, because Game Freak keeps pushing Gen 1 because of its success. And the new additions don't fix the potholes left over from the previous game, making Gen 2 Pokemon in most cases just a worse version of Gen 1 Pokemon, which is a huge shame. But the problem with Pokemon in Gold and Silver becomes ever so glaring when you go get the badges at the gyms. It's like Game Freak themselves were embarrassed with the Pokédex they brought out, so they decided to use the minimal amount of Gen 2 Pokemon needed in the gyms of these games. Out of 23 Pokemon in the gyms of Generation 2, only 4 of them are Gen 2 Pokemon. That is absolutely insane, and the worst part about it is that Game Freak actually could have used more Gen 2 mons, but probably was too scared of breaking an already working formula. And this is why I say that Pokemon Gold and Silver feel like Red and Blue 2.0. 4 out of 8 gym leaders don't even have any new additions. Why not give Falkner the Hutu line instead of the Pidgey line? Why even make a Ghost Gym if you have 4 Ghost-type Pokemon in the entire game? And why, if you already have it, not use the new Ghost-type instead of the Ghastly line all over again? Why make a Dragon Gym if you have just 4 Dragon Pokemon in the entire game? But even though the gym leaders are very questionable with the Pokemon they have, the gyms themselves as buildings are fine. I would say that they are better than Gen 1 gyms. You have okay puzzles and the story around them is fine. The gyms are also pretty weirdly constructed. You have Morty, which is the 4th gym leader and he has 4 mons, and then you have Chuck, who's the 6th gym leader and he has 2 mons. Also, the last gym leader's ace is a level 40 Kingdra. That's the lowest level, the last gym ace in the series, and it's not even close. The Elite Four aren't any better. Lance uses 3 Dragonites. Guys, I know Lance is the dragon guy, but really? 3 Dragonites? Could you not give him a Kingdra? Claire has a Kingdra and it works perfectly fine for her. So then why does Lance have 3 Dragonites? And that's not the only thing wrong, because some Elite Four members don't even have Pokemon reserved for their typing or the theme of the typing. Like, why does Karen have a Wild-Plume in her team, being that Karen is a Dark-type specialist? And why the hell does Koga have a Fortress, being that Koga uses Poison types? Flint had the same problem in Gen 4 because there were only 5 Fire-type Pokemon in that game, but inclusions that aren't Fire types make sense. Steelix is a Steel type, Steel needs to be forged with fire. Drifblim is a hot air balloon which needs fire to work, and Lopunny is just hot. I mean, there is no other way around it. Johto tries the same thing, but it doesn't work that well. Also, if you worry about Kanto's gyms, have no fear. They stay mostly the same, except that some gym leaders don't give you TMs, and that is massive bullshit if you ask me. In conclusion, the gyms are very low leveled because of Kanto, and both the typings of gyms and the Pokemon used in them could have been so much more better than what we actually got. Pokemon Gold and Silver are an anomaly in the franchise. Not just because they're bad, but because these games feature two regions in its possession, Johto and Kanto. Johto is a fine region. It sticks with its theme and has a great vibe, great music, and looks pretty for what the Game Boy Color was capable. The rural thematic is great, and the cities and every route follow it well, but it all goes out of the window with the inclusion of Kanto. It just feels like Game Freak wasn't comfortable enough with Johto on its own, so they decided to add Kanto like a last-second bandit solution. I think the game could have been better if you just left Johto and made it bigger and the experience lasts longer, because you brush through Johto very fast. But Johto ain't quite an angel as well. The game adds that, oh, you can pick the path you want and do the story your way type thing, which Gen 1 did as well, and it does not work. It kills any sort of pacing the game's had, and I had fun for the first 4 gyms until I got to Olivine and didn't play the game for a month. The games try to be less linear by making you choose the path you want, but they just do it poorly and in a bad way. Okay, so look at this. These are the levels of aces of gym leaders. They go a little bit like this. Chuck 30, Jasmine 35, Price 31. The way it seems to be intended is to do Chuck first, then Price, then Jasmine. But that makes no sense because of the map layout. It makes your path that much complicating for no reason, and it kills the pacing and any sort of structure the games had with it. They could have at least optimized the gym leaders by making the levels change in order of what gyms you defeat, or they could have trashed the whole idea out because it just does not work. And because the levels of gyms in Johto are held so low, the trainers are weak as shit and wild Pokemon have absurdly low levels, which is awful A, because adding new additions to the team is very hard and very time consuming, and B, it's awful for grinding because the levels are so low that grinding 40 level mons is an impossible task. Johto does have this problem, but Kanto takes it on a whole nother level. The level of Pokemon trainers and wild Pokemon does not change whatsoever. They even become worse. Okay, just look at this clip for a second. This is the route just ahead of Viridian City. I encounter a trainer with 3 level 30 Beedrills, and then I step into the grass, only to encounter a level 5 Pikachu. Level 5. Keep in mind, I just defeated the champion of Johto and a guy that had 3 level 30 Beedrills in the same route. They really did not change any of the wild Pokemon, and it makes Kanto a hellscape for grinding. The gyms have the same level curve problems, which makes Kanto a labyrinth to go through, and after the Elite Four, you're expected to have your team around level 50 or 45. Then why is Janine's ace in Fuchsia a level 39 Venomoth? It's lower than the first member's first Pokemon in the Elite Four. And because of the awful level curve, your route of exploring should look a little bit like this. Now that's crazy. But not all of Kanto's problems just stop there, because Gen 2 Kanto is a sad excuse for an area. I know that Gold and Silver were supposed to be the last games in the franchise, so they added Kanto in one last time, but the addition of Kanto makes all of Johto's problems surface in a new light. They actually changed a lot of things, like Cinnabar Island being destroyed by a volcano, Viridian Forest being a barren wasteland, and so on. But it doesn't feel like inclusion's put there for the diversity. It seems like they rushed the game or ran out of a budget. The whole game has this vibe of being rushed and incomplete, and I think it's a huge waste, because in my opinion, if they focused on Johto, I wouldn't be making this video. I think that this would be a very solid Pokemon title, but the inclusion of Kanto makes the unbalance and destroys anything Johto had going for it from the start. The ideas and inclusions weren't bad in theory, but they were done in a very bad way all the way from Pokemon to game design. Pokemon Gold and Silver had a solid foundation until Game Freak began to build on top of it and everything just fell off. I don't think that the inclusion of Johto is necessarily bad. I really like the rural thematic of the region, but it's way too short and it shares way too many similarities with Kanto. The games also don't feel finished, they feel very rushed, all the way from Kanto to the story, which just does not have a climax. There are too little good things and too many bad things around the games. The impact the games had on the future of the franchise is still massive, and they did very well business-wise, but they did so many things in a poor way, which in my opinion makes them the worst games in the franchise.